I'm really excited to introduce to you all Rabbi Sandy Eisenberg Sasso. Um, where do I begin with how amazing she is? First, I want to share with you that Rabbi Sasso is the first woman to be ordained as a Reconstructionist rabbi. She's a teacher and an author. She writes Midrash stories based on traditional Jewish texts for children, among other things. In her books for children, Rabbi Sasso imparts Jewish values with a light touch and a sense of wonder. The time I spent with Rabbi Sasso felt so special to me. I felt like I was in the presence of this great depth of wisdom. It was so uplifting, and I can't begin to tell you how excited I was and how delighted I am that she's here today to share with you some thoughts about Midrash.
Well, thank you, Barbara. I'm really delighted to be here. And I have to say there's an extra amount of pleasure in listening to the other artists. It's one thing to see them in the pages of the beautiful book, but it's another thing to hear from them. And I only wish we could all be together so we could get to know each other better. And actually, two of the presentations felt like Midrash. Okay, so I'm going to just piggyback on that. So when Nora said her Sunday school, I'd love to know which synagogue that was, said you begin by asking questions. That's really the beginning of Midrash. Can I ask you what school it was?
Yeah, it was the Havurah School at Anshe Chesed in New York.
Okay, yes, I know that. Okay, that's great. I mean, that's what I talk about all the time. So you look at a Bible story and you start asking questions. That's the beginning of Midrash. And then Harriet with the recycled Seder plate and materials, in so many ways, what you're taking is the Bible story and you're recycling it through yourself and creating something even more beautiful that you never could have imagined. So that felt like we're really connected here. So to explain Midrash just a little bit, I'm going to ask you to sort of use your imagination. So imagine for a moment that you're Noah's wife from the biblical story of the flood. What's your name? What should people call you? And what are you doing on the ark? I'm thinking you're not cleaning up the mess of the animals. What are you feeling about all the destruction around you? I mean, did you look out at the water and what's happened? So Noah was silent when God told him about the plan to destroy the world. Is there something you want to say to Noah? Or do you want to speak to God? And before you boarded the ark, what did you say to your neighbor? All these questions are the beginning of a new story. So they're based on, of course, the biblical story, but then they begin to imagine and they allow you to tell things that are happening to you today and to the world today through that story. So there's so many other stories like that, and many of which I've written children's books on. So another one that I'm really fascinated by, as you can see this picture behind me, it's an illustration from one of my children's books called Creation's First Light. And it started out by asking the question, what is the light of the first day of creation? So if you read the story of creation, the fourth day says God created the sun and the moon, right? So what's this light? If it's not the sun or the moon, what light is it? And so I went back to look at different Jewish sources to discover there was a thought that there was a light before the sun and the moon, sort of a spiritual light by which we saw from one end of the earth to the other. And when Adam and Eve ate from the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, we lost that light. But then, we can't be too pessimistic. The rabbis go on to say, no, there are many places you can find that light if you know where to look. And so this is a story of all the places where you can find that light. And so this is one of them in the Torah, but some of it had to do with in a field of memories, in a hug, in the eyes of a newborn baby. Where do you find that light? And one other example is the story of, we'll go back to early stories in Genesis, the story of Adam and Eve. When the sun sets for the first time, and Adam and Eve don't know if it'll ever rise again. How would they? And it's dark, and the world's going to be destroyed. It could be the end of the world. How do you get through the night? Midrash begins to answer that question. So the word Midrash, so here's some examples of Midrash. Noah's wife, which answers, she does have a name, Naamah. Finding the fruits of peace is the story of Cain and Abel. The text does not tell us what they argued about. It just said that, Cain came to Abel and they were in the field and Cain killed Abel. So what were they arguing about? But God remembered his 4 different stories of women from creation to the promised land, and they're Midrash. And a very big problem is the story of each part of creation thinking it's better than all the other parts until they come together and recognize they're all needed. So let me just say a brief word about what Midrash is. The word itself means to search out, in a sense, to discover what is missing or troubling in the story we have, and to allow this ancient story to tell us something about our own lives. So Midrash is both a product and a process. I mean, you can find collections of Midrash written by the rabbis from about 400 to 1200 CE, in which they are interpreting the stories for a new generation. But it's also a process in which you can participate, because it's a way of reading these ancient stories that allow us not to just be descendants who receive those stories, but ancestors who share our spiritual quest with a new generation. So, when it says at the very beginning of Genesis, when God began to create the heavens and the earth, they were without form or void. So basically what you're doing is when you begin to create, what you have in front of you is some material that's partially formed, but not completely formed. And you are a co-creator with God in continuing to create that story. So write Midrash, become a character, be a witness, be an onlooker, sit at the same table with people from long, long ago and begin a conversation. Be open, and most of all, be surprised. When I write these stories, every time I work on them, I'm always surprised.
Thank you, Rabbi Sasso, for that beautiful presentation. I had some questions for you that you answered within your presentation, but I do have a follow-up. I think, we in DIJ, we're encouraging, of course, all ages, but particularly kids to kind of embrace these creative projects and connect to their Jewish life. What if we had a young person who said, I don't really have a religious background. I don't know a lot. Can I do this? Can I start? Where do I begin when I don't even know what question I have?
So the nice thing is you begin with a story. Okay, you tell the story of crossing the sea, right? We tell that always at Passover. And then we say, okay, I want you to be there at the sea before it splits. Okay, there you are. How do you feel? Are you afraid? Do you want to go back home? Do you want to put your toes in the water? Are you courageous? Are you going to stay back? So this is if you ask enough questions and you have enough of the story, you can begin to talk. And what happens is then you want to find out more. Oh, I wonder what other people said about what happened when we crossed the sea. So that leads you to even further discovery. I never thought about Noah's wife. And someone at Sunday school asked me, who is Noah's wife? And I was embarrassed to say, I have no idea who Noah's wife is. And so I went and I looked it up and I kept finding more and more materials. So anybody can do this. And it doesn't only have to be words. Okay, I mean, of course, traditional Midrash are words. However, it can be a painting, paint your feelings of how it would have been on the ark. It can be a song, create a song. It can, there's so many ways of responding to this text if you use the process. And what's so fascinating, there are lots of collections of Midrashim for young people. So that's something you can bring into a home or a classroom to broaden the understanding of the story.
Thank you. I love that you're encouraging all of us to start with an I don't know, because I think that tends to stop us if we don't know something and we don't know where to start. And I love that you're encouraging us to start from that place and to keep moving. So thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of the book and for contributing so very much.